Welcome back to Logical Magic, Examining Esoterica. Okay guys, today's topic is about how we break our cycles, how we find our inner rebel, because that is part of cycle breaking. And cycle breaking is an important concept in our place in this world and in our place in our spiritual journey. It's also part of our healing journey. When we hear people refer to breaking generational trauma, breaking generational curses, what they're really talking about is breaking free of a repeating energy signature, which most of our souls are kind of trapped in. Now, before I get started, I have to refer to the fact that if you haven't done your healing work yet, particularly if you have CPTSD, PTSD, or are neurodivergent, which a lot of people who are neurodivergent end up incurring incredible amounts of trauma, trying to interact with a world that expects them to behave differently from who they are. And they find the masking process incredibly draining and exhausting. And the best way to deal with that is through spiritual healing. So I've done 2 years worth of episodes that can guide people if you're at the very beginning of it, because codependency quite frequently results from trauma. And so people have to resolve some of the issues with their formative damage, or what's also referred to as inner child healing. And all the episodes preceding this that aren't interviews deal with that. I did a lot of episodes with Jacob as well. Jacob is neurodivergent, he's ADHD, and he's also bipolar. So I was actually talking to somebody who has a lot of experience with what it feels like to try and interact with the world with those extra trauma barriers as well. So let's get to today's topic because, oh wait, well, I have to do my housekeeping. Let's do the housekeeping super quick. If you need to find me for a tarot card reading, a life coaching session, if there's just part of your spiritual journey that you need to talk over, you can do so at therisingmoon.com exclusively. That is the only way to book me, and I will never approach you in comment sections or in messages. Those we get scammed on those things as well. People can pretend to be people who have YouTube channels or any form of following. And you can find me at Tarot at the Rising Moon on YouTube. That's where all of the video versions of this particular podcast go up. And you can find me at Logical Magic Examining Esoterica, which comes out on the first Thursday of every month. So, cycle breaking. First of all, remember that karma is the first way that we approach cycles. And karma is greatly misunderstood in that we think of it as a form of rewards and punishments, and it's not. It's lessons accumulation. And that's really what it is. If you behave in a way that brings good things to you, that's considered good karma. But what it really is your energetic balance is shifting towards the positive. If you behave in a way that is harmful to others, that is egocentric, that is grasping and unkind, then that accumulates a negative energy. And that has to be balanced out before we can do something called ascension, which is also alignment or integration with our higher selves. And when you start out on a healing journey, you want it to be over so much more quickly than it is. And that is part of a cycle. Because part of our cycle is learning how to be patient with our own process, learning how to be patient with others, and learning to be a student of the lessons that karma is trying to teach us. And what happens when we learn those lessons? Well, the concept of being ascended. Now, can you be in the physical form and be in an ascended energy? You can. A lot of spiritual teachers begin to leave the physical realm behind. I stay very grounded within it because I help people who are interested in life's purpose, which always includes our what do we need to do to be of service to others. It's part of life's purpose. But part of life's purpose is also what do we need to do to be in service to ourselves. And the first step is always healing. Understanding our cycles is the easiest way to start doing that. So there's no way to fast forward it. You can do all the subliminal recordings that you want around releasing generational trauma, but there's always going to be emotional processing work that involves understanding something from an intellectual perspective that then informs how you approach the emotional perspective. And I can give you an example of what that might feel like or look like. And I'll use myself as an example because that way nobody else is offended, that way nobody else gets in trouble. Here is one of the ways in which ego became part of my own healing journey and how it dissolves over time and is removed from us like an onion, layer after layer after layer. As I have covered before, I had such a traumatic childhood that literally looking at it from an outside perspective, there was literally no way and I always laugh about it because it's a trauma response. Inappropriate laughter is a way of expressing that nervous energy around, like, it's hard to talk about, but I need to do so. And the reason I started doing so was I found out how many people were suffering from so many of the same forms of trauma. And unless we are willing to talk about something honestly, everybody learns best through example. We need something that we can identify with, and people with deep, deep trauma, they weren't being allowed to on a deep level, because beyond a certain point, beyond in your formative experience, if you were incredibly damaged, people expect you to get into your adult life and be like, well, that's your past, put it behind you, heal. You can't heal something unless you understand what it did to you. And so that is why talking about trauma as openly as possible as I can here without being triggering is part of the challenge. So my backstory is bad. If I went fully into it, we'd be through the whole hour here. So just accept that, it contained physical abuse, emotional abuse, bullying, neglect, abandonment, sudden death, like all kinds of like, oh no, I got yanked around like a yo-yo. And in my early 20s, I was angry. And part of this journey has taught me that anger is the one to look for in ego. That if you're trying to like, well, how do I do the release of ego? And release is not that you surrender it, it's that you recognize when it's guiding your steps. And you take the steps to either embrace it or counteract it, because sometimes it is actually appropriate to say, I need to prioritize the me right now. Sometimes it is. And I'll go into a little bit how the spiritual lessons of understanding our boundaries, how we can take things to an extreme, and how it kind of ends up tripping us up because that pulls something out of balance. So in my own life, super angry in my 20s, cannot say that I was a successful person in my personal interactions. I had not learned a lot of things. I was so isolated as a child, I was like an unsocialized dog. I didn't know what I was doing. So it was hard for me because I felt very afflicted. Because I didn't get why other people had families and cousins and uncles, and like I had two parents who were both narcissists and both violent. And my mother is one of the most unkind people in the world, but she pretends that she isn't and then attacks people when they're least expecting it. And she won't ever rise to the level of understanding that. I totally forgive her for that because I look at her mother and understand my mother is just a product of her environment, that I don't get how she could have acted that way, but also I don't really blame her because she's older and she didn't come from a time where we looked at this very closely. 20s, super angry, not making a lot of progress. 27 years old, I have a head-on collision on the way home from work on December 23rd. So it's right before Christmas. And these are the words that were used to describe the injuries. I pulverized multiple bones. I didn't break the skin anywhere on my body, but I pulverized my right heel and I broke most of my left hand, particularly all across the metacarpals. So I had opposite side breaks, which lands me in a wheelchair for the entire time that I'm healing. But it was also bad enough that it needed complete surgical reconstruction on the right side. And I have told this story before, so I'll shorthand it. Lying there, having surgery on New Year's Eve because of the waits for the swelling to go down, feeling just like put upon, feeling the why of it all. Why me? Why me? And I can hear somebody cursing their head off in the orthopedic wing on New Year's Eve. And the only people who are there are like people there's no choice. The nurse comes in and I'm like, what's his problem? Because I was not in my best energy. And she said to me that it was a man in his 30s and he was a young father and he had gone out to play rugby on the weekend and had fallen badly and broken his neck, and he was a quadriplegic going forward, so he had paralysis in all four quadrants. And I realized in that car accident, which wasn't my fault, which was part of the reason that I was like, why did this have to happen to me? I wasn't breaking any rules. I realized that I had gotten incredibly lucky, that I had the minimal injuries that I could have in that situation. And it was long enough ago that the car didn't have an airbag. They weren't mandatory at that particular point. And so I was incredibly lucky that my face had not gone through the windshield. I hadn't broken my neck. I hadn't been driven into the steering column, which would have crushed my chest. All of those things finally hit me like a lightning bolt. It was my very first epiphany of, oh my God, I'm so lucky. And it changed my perspective on absolutely everything, because instead of looking at my backstory as I'm so afflicted, it was like, wow, I got so lucky that I keep managing to land on my feet. Now, in that particular instance, I had an injury that every step I took hurt for about 15 years. So I had a constant reminder, but I also had a goal to reach, and I never believed in myself, and I could never believe that I could reach goals. I was told there was literally no way that I would not limp again, that I'd walk around not limping, that my balance was going to be completely shot. It was considered a devastating injury, and in fact, I was given the full payout on the person's insurance because they were like, yeah, we're not taking that girl to court. She looks pathetic. Like, I was in a wheelchair, and of course, you know, I don't look like I'm a Viking or something, and so they were going to wheel me in front of a jury or something, and it was not going to go all that well for them, and they knew it, and so they were just like, take the money. And so they did. That's what we did. It changed my perspective, but not entirely. I still had more things to struggle through, and I had been making bad relationship choices, accepting poor treatment. I actually was married to somebody who did not treat me very well for a very long time, but I accepted it about him because I always understood certain things about him. One of the things that I understood was that he had many signs of narcissism, but my mother was a narcissist, my father was a narcissist. My father likely had autism and ADHD. But the way that he behaved was that other people's, you know, feelings when he was upset didn't matter at all. And he was dangerous, and he was violent, and he was reactionary, and it was like walking on eggshells around him. And he also wasn't around that much because he was in Washington, D.C. working for the Center for Strategic and International Studies in their research department because he had this very specialized degree, as people with autism quite frequently will. He did not know he had autism. It was not actually something that was ever discussed. Then he volunteered for the Korean War because he was an older dad, and made everything absolutely worse. Every choice that he made his situation worse and worse and worse and worse. And I forgive him as well. And part of our ego release is forgiving those who have harmed us. And so I stayed married to this person who was not treating me properly and had all his own stuff, just all his own stuff. And things would get worse and worse and worse, but I was trying to provide a life for my son. I didn't have a lot of faith in myself. The injury that I sustained, I managed to rehab it because I didn't give up on it. I just kept going. And now the muscle mass is straightened out. I don't experience much pain ever. I hike, I jump around, I have balance in that side again. Even though I'm not supposed to have been able to have done that, I did it. And it gave me a lot of confidence in the fact that, like, hey, if I tackle something, if I just stick with it, then I will be able to do it. And that's the first thing that you need to believe about yourself, is that, like, I'm a good problem solver, I can do this. That's the first step in your release of trauma, in your ability to ascend, in your ability to break a cycle. Everything that I'm describing is about breaking a cycle. The thing with the injury, not letting it hold me back, I come from a long line of people who, when there's a significant obstacle in their path, they sit down in front of the obstacle and go, well, there's nothing I can do. And I am the person who's like, I can go over it, I can tunnel under it, I can burn it to the ground, I can go around it. I have just always been that person. I'm like the human terrier. And in fact, have always favored terriers as dogs because they're very, very, very willful. And I took stubbornness and turned it into willpower. And I was fortunate in that my genetic line helped me with that. But that same genetic line, being very wedded to stubbornness, had people who never, ever, ever would admit when they were wrong, when they had something to heal, when they had done something that was regretful, that they needed to change about themselves. And so it became, that's what you are. If you're breaking cycles, you're the cycle breaker, you're the curse breaker, you're the general trauma releaser, and it can be very, very difficult. And in fact, the path through life was difficult, but fast forward to knowing how do you start breaking cycles. You identify in your own life where you need to have that perspective shift. The perspective shift of, how am I getting in my own way? How am I looking at a situation that keeps me locked in this loop? And the easiest way to do it is to step outside of yourself and consider your story as a book that you are reading or a television program that you are watching. Try to detach from it, no matter how much pain it caused you. And sometimes you have to process the pain first. I had never allowed myself to feel any grief because everyone who had died close to me, including my father, who died very dramatically in front of me when I was like 15, a couple weeks before my 16th birthday, forcing me to go live with my mother, who I did not know and not like very much because she had abandoned me so often. And she was purposely unkind to people. She takes her feelings out on people. So I went from the frying pan into the fire in that particular instance. But it was something that taught me that grief was like, it wasn't sad and soft and mourning the loss of a person. It was the thing that you had to endure and keep going through. And I was very like rigid around not feeling grief. Part of my process has been feeling the grief, and it had multiple triggers around it. And that's what you need to do, is find your own pattern of, particularly look for where you've been angry or impatient, because impatience and anger are very, very closely related, and they are both masking energies. And that's what you have to find, is your masking energy in order to break cycles, because that's what keeps us locked in on it. It's the denial aspect. Now, denial is actually a protective construct. If you really can't handle something, it's not going to be brought to you until you're ready to handle it. But if something keeps returning to you and keeps returning to you and keeps returning to you, it's trying to tell you something. And for me, it was trying to deal with the fact that, I have this genetic predisposition towards incredible anger, like this like transformative, oh my God, it's horrible and inhuman level. And I don't take it out on people at all any longer. I've finally learned to understand that if I feel a spark of anger, that's actually my power. And that what I really should do is figure out what's actually bothering you here. Because if I look at it from that angle, I can make it not about me. One of the things that I had to learn was that my biggest anger trigger was when somebody did something that I didn't know how to handle because I had all my own stuff, I would get angry. And it wasn't, I never became like, I don't name call, I don't do anything. I've seen people see me get angry, and even when I'm not doing something, they start like, wow, because I don't know what it is. I have a lot of personal energy. And it was the thing I most wanted to cure. It was the thing that I felt held me back from forgiveness, and that was true. Find the area that you hold resentment and anger for, because the biggest blocking energy to breaking a cycle is an inability to forgive and learn. And forgiveness does not have to do with saying what the other person did was okay. Forgiveness has to do with saying it's not defining me. I've let it go as the thing that motivates me. I've let it go as the thing that influences me. And then the very last stage is you find yourself wishing the person who hurt you well. And I need you to understand the difference between the word well and fortunate, because they're not the same world. You are not wishing that person good fortune. You are wishing them well, which is actually healing. And that is the last stage in healing. And I didn't think I was ever going to get there with my ex-husband, because he did some things that were, I won't go into them because I've actually let go of them. But they were bad, and they were damaging, and they were meant to be, and they were vindictive. And I really, really had a hard time letting go of that until I just kept healing and healing and healing, and realized one day when I was thinking about him, because a picture had popped up on my phone, that I was like, I hope he figures out his stuff. There's a decent enough human being in there. He's just confused. And it wasn't a conscious thing. It was just kind of looking at his picture and going, poor sod. And that was it. That was the moment where I realized I wished him well. That I literally was hoping, it's like, I hope you find the best version of yourself, because it's there. He's a person who like does have good impulses as well. And, I wish the same thing for his whole family, which they suffer so much from their accumulated generational trauma that they've built this giant denial construct around, particularly when it comes to substance use. Like they think it's cool, and it's like, no, that's the thing that's keeping you sick. And I really, really, really did wish them all well, and I still do. And that was when I knew I had released it. There's something, if you are still struggling with anxiety, with fear, and with anger, there's something that you need to identify to let go of. And the work around that can be arduous. It can be confronting what somebody really did. And I see many people achieve faux forgiveness where they're like, I am spiritual now, so I completely forgive you. But they're still mystified by the stuff that other people did that still hurts them. And that's how you can tell it's faux forgiveness, is that you still are like, why did they? Why? If why is still a big question, if you have a lot of why question marks around other people's behaviors, why did they ghost? Why did they do this? Why? Because they have all their own crap. If you have been ghosted, it is not because you did something. It is because the person has attachment issues and is avoidant. Now, they may not like you back in the same way or something, but they don't have the, like I said, I would get angry with people when they did something that I didn't know how to handle. Ghosters have been confronted with something that they don't really know how to handle, or they make an excuse where it's okay, they'll get the hint. But it's not something you've done, it's something that they're avoiding. And you can tell you're healed when other people's behavior is like, that is actually about you. Sometimes it's aimed at me, but I've got a really good shield now because I'm healed. And we're going to talk about how taking that, protecting your peace, recognizing your limits, because there are all stages in healing. Breaking cycles begin with identifying what, and they're not bad, but they are detracting emotions. If you are angry, if you are sad, if you are anxious, if you are frustrated, these are things that detract from your experience of trying to be in love with the concept of being alive. And I can honestly say I love being alive. And I didn't think that was going to be humanly possible a few years ago. It happened over the course of the last year when I gave myself permission to find the inner rebel concept, which is that whatever you've been told about this will be good for you or that will be good for you, remember we are meant to be different from one another, and you might be an outlier or atypical in one area. I am atypical in that I like a lot of isolation. It's good for me. And everything the psychological world says, no, it's not. It's terrible for you. You will wither and die and be depressed and not wish to be alive any longer. And the exact opposite was true. About a year ago, I gave myself permission to not do anything social if I didn't feel like it. Because for years I had held myself to the standard of this is what I have to do to achieve personal health. So I will have this many social engagements a month, and I will do this and I will do that, and I will make sure I sit in the sun and yada, yada, yada. And I started balancing that more with, do I actually have the bandwidth? Because that's where ego comes in. And ego is something that we need to talk about in cycle breaking. And I've done a full podcast on it, but we need to revisit it because it's so misunderstood. Ego is part of you. It is a false construct sometimes, but sometimes it's also a flare that tells you you need to be more self-protective. So there's a balance to be struck in that. And the easiest one to point to is people protecting their peace. You have to protect your peace. You have to protect your peace. You have to protect your peace. If that has to be your priority right now, you're healing. There comes a stage in healing where you're healed enough that protecting your peace is not a question of, is this what I want to do? But rather, am I able to do this without harming self? Because we are meant to interact with one another and to have energy exchanges and to be in an ever-expanding energy. And we are meant to try and help each other where it will actually help the other person. So sometimes it's not about doing what you want. Or that, hey, my alone time is very, very important to me. If somebody has a need right now, I have to weigh it out with, do I have the energy for it? And if the answer is no, I don't have any guilt around it. If the answer is yes, then I might if I don't do the right thing. But I'm pretty prone to doing the right thing. I try really, really hard. And the easiest way to understand an ego concept and how it's being gotten wrong in that extremist view we have a tendency to take of is the concept of being a people pleaser. People pleasing, where you do things that, to be a good friend, to be a supportive sister, to be a supportive brother, to be whatever it might be, where somebody asks you to do something and your feeling is, I should do that, but there's resentment there. It's been termed an ego issue if you're a people pleaser. It is an ego issue, but it's been misidentified as to why. It has been put out on places like Instagram and social media that being a people pleaser is about wanting to feel good about yourself. Not usually. Being a people pleaser is about trying not to feel guilty and ashamed of yourself. Being a people pleaser is about trying to earn your own worth in your own eyes. As is hustle culture, where people think rest is evil even though they're exhausted. If, the idea of abundance is having enough. So you're always supposed to measure, do I have an actual sustaining survival need around having to do this particular thing? Do I have the emotional bandwidth? Do I have the emotional energy? And then you run it past your own core integrity of, do I believe it is important to help others? Now, listen, I can't imagine anybody's watching this particular podcast for any length of time if they don't care about helping others, because that's part of life's purpose. It's not the chief part, it's in balance. In the work-life balance thing that also exists in the life's purpose and sustaining self-balance. And when people term people pleasing about, hey, it's about making yourself feel good, well, guess what that does? It reinforces shame. You should be ashamed of yourself. That's about your vanity. No, it's about your sense of self. If you have somebody in your life that cannot hear, and I did have to get rid of somebody who simply could not hear. I could not do what you needed me to do, even though you're very emotionally dependent on me. I couldn't do what you needed me to do because I was not well. I was too tired and I was dealing with my own crap. And it ended a very long-term friendship that I only recognized was codependent in the aftermath when I just cut the person off, finally saying, I can't do this anymore, and cut the person off. And because they just simply could not, they couldn't gain that perspective of, she has a right to all her emotional needs and she's not there to meet mine. And that really, she couldn't get there because she was in a lot of pain, and that's all. But we have all of those things within our life. Is we have to recognize ego is about our vision of self. And sometimes it will be, I can't cut off a long-term friendship. That person's been with me my whole journey. It's like, but if it's not good for you, you're supposed to. That letting go of things that aren't good for you is the biggest part of breaking cycles. And it can be friendships, it can be activities, it can be relationships, it can be in how you approach relationships, and it can be in recognizing external influence in what we are told to want, like a society that tells people it is integral to your emotional, psychological health to have social activity. Dudes, not for everybody. I finally got rid of my depression. I finally got rid of my anxiety. I finally got rid of my stress responses when I gave myself permission to not be social, because I'd been told over and over again it would be bad for me not to be. And when I did that, and when I started to feel so much better, I looked at, like, well, what would the agenda be behind trying to tell people that? And it's like, it's to keep them entirely codependent. We have codependency, our view of self, depending on our exterior relationships, ingrained into us. It is in find a romantic partner or you're not lovable. And that's the undercurrent of everything that we're told. There's a patriarchal power structure. Almost everything that we are taught about ourselves serves the need of a society. And our society has swung towards materialism and accumulation of wealth, and trying to find your happiness and stuff. And the other thing I did this year was I just released all forms of materialism in terms of, I'm going to bake all of my own bread, I'm going to make my own food, I'm going to disconnect from this machine as much as I can to figure out who my authentic self really is. And my authentic self is made very happy by very simple things. I don't actually need much. And I knew I was finally healed when I was reading on Reddit, because I read on Reddit because it keeps me in touch with the dead internet theory, which is an interesting one, and you can see it in play sometimes. And the dead internet theory is that nothing on the internet is real, it's all filled with bots. Is it true? To an extent, but not really. But I also read the Reddit things in order to see the ways in which codependency is influencing relationship choices. And you will see these people posting about, why overreacting, and someone's outlining just hideous behavior towards them. And like, they're not leaving that person behind because they're so dependent on having this exterior relationship. That is enforced through monetary need as well. So if you are in a dependent relationship because of financial need, know that it has been forced upon you, but you can still spiritually free yourself. You can. You can stop having other people have a great impact on you. So we find where we need to change our perspective. We identify the detracting energy responses or emotions that we have. We learn how to look at them logically, but not deny them with that, because you can over-intellectualize things. And that's what you have to watch out for in cycle breaking, is you can swing towards another cycle. And the whole protect your peace thing of, like, people, I will give you an example from Reddit. This is an anonymous person. If you're listening, hey, I'm not making fun of you. It's just, it was the thing that inspired part of this How to Break a Cycle. This person had learned a lot about emotional health, quite frankly. They were in a break room where they work, and their break time is very, very important to them. And they were sitting there and reading and playing on their phone, and in the corner was somebody's 7-year-old daughter who had to come to work with her that day, coloring. And her mom wanted to run to the grocery store without taking the kid. And she asked the person sitting there, hey, could you keep an eye on her while I run to the grocery store? And they said no, because protect my peace. I don't want to. That's ego. it wouldn't have been any skin off of their nose whatsoever. The kid was sitting over there coloring, borrowing an emergency in a crowded office thing. He would have had plenty of backup. They said no, and then they were mystified. It's like, now everybody's treating me like I'm not like a good person. It's like, well, you could have helped and you didn't, and it wasn't going to cost you. Now, could that person have had a whole situation where it's like, I was depressed, I was this, I was that, I really didn't have it in me to extend myself even by being a physical presence to make sure if that child starts choking, I can at least yell for help. They really may not have been there, but that was not what they were outlining. And that's how things can be taken to an extreme, where it's important to have good boundaries, but good boundaries are not set in stone. They are set in, can I do this without costing myself? Would it be a kind and compassionate thing? What if I was in that person's shoes? And that's what it really came down to on that. And what is the right answer and what is the wrong answer? That person was dissatisfied with the results of their choice and confused as to why it then had a blowback on it, where like nobody in the office liked them any longer because they had done something that was like, all that she was asking you to do was sit there, continue playing your game and let the kid in the corner color. That was all that person was asking for. But we learn to enforce boundaries and we do it at first poorly. We overemphasize things, we overdo it, and that is part of our journey. So in cycle breaking, you want to make sure you're not accidentally reinforcing a different form of detracting cycle. And in that person's case, they were creating a distancing behavior where it seemed so unkind to the other person. Did they owe that other person kindness? It depends on where you're approaching this from. From a spiritual perspective, if it is not going to cost you, if it is within your bandwidth to do something decent and kind, we are asked to do that because it's part of the unconditional love that we are meant to bear for others, even when we don't agree with them. And that's the hardest one right now. And why do we want to look at breaking cycles and being like, well, why would I want to do that work? I'm pretty happy with this. It sounds difficult and like you're always running things past your core integrity to see what the right answer is. And it sounds like it's a long journey through constant evolution, and it is. And the point in doing it is that you feel better, you feel more connected, you feel joyful, you feel energetic, you feel peaceful even in a difficult and a conflicted world. And the world contains negative energy, positive energy, and neutral energy. People do as well. Some people are very neutral. Some people are actively like, yeah, greed, evil, yay, violence. Those people exist as well. And there are people who are very drawn towards, I just want to be the best version of me that I can be. I want to contribute. I want to have a life's purpose. I want to feel like there's meaning to this. And those are the people I'm talking to. But I don't begrudge other people their role in this. I just try and steer clear of the, yay, evil folk. And the neutral people, well, we don't have a lot in common, but like, I'm not judging them. It's like, that's their journey this time. And that's another part of the cycle breaking, is thinking that your answer needs to be everybody else's answer. Find your own connection to self and to source. And part of the reason that we want to break our cycles right now is we're repeating a dire one. We are repeating a dire. I studied history my whole life. My father was a historian. When I referred to his incredibly rarefied education that led to him meeting my mother, he was very, very targeted as a historian. I grew up with literally my genetic predisposition is towards loving history. So I've been studying it my whole life. And without belaboring the point, because it's all over the place right now, we are repeating societal cycles at a level of, this typically doesn't end well, but we can always have a different outcome if people start breaking free of that energy. And that is why you got to find your inner rebel. You got to find your inner rebel. If people are telling you, get mad at people who don't believe as you do, please don't do that. Anger is the most destructive thing. Anger is the most destructive thing. It doesn't mean let them get away with blue bloody murder, but what it does mean is don't let it poison your inner soul. If you are very angry with the people who, they're frightened for their own survival, and they've been taught screwed up things, and they believe them wholeheartedly because we all believe what we're taught until we learn to question it. And the only way to get people to question what they believe is to speak to them with understanding and compassion of, I don't know what formed your viewpoint, but I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that like maybe you're a decent human being who's just flailing through life, terrified in a really anxiety-producing world, that things aren't going to turn out well unless it's molded into your egocentric vision. And again, it's not about vanity. It's about like, this is what I need to keep the every part of me that takes things personally part safe. That is part of a spiritual journey, and that is part of cycle breaking, is learning not to take things personally. And when you're really in a lot of pain, please don't put a lot of pressure on yourself, because so many of these concepts can turn towards shaming if someone is still in pain. And there's absolutely nothing less compassionate than looking at somebody who is in pain and expressing it and saying, you're being a victim, or you're living in the past, or they're in pain. They're in pain. First, start from a point of like, I understand you're in pain. I help people heal from emotional trauma that often results in codependency. Codependency is technically a form of addiction. It's one of the hardest ones to heal because it only exists on an emotional and an energetic and a logical level. It only survives the logical level by encased and entrenched denial of what the way we are participating in our own process. The only way to heal from codependence is independence through ego death. And it is not releasing the idea that you matter. It is saying that you can feel better. And if you are resisting feeling better because it involves, I might not get what I want, but I will get what I need to feel happier. The thing that I was talking about within the last year and really, really simplifying my life is at the very beginning of this list of things I wanted, most of them didn't turn out. Some of them did. Most of them didn't. And every single one that didn't, I have no resentment over, because it's like, wow, I see how that's best. That was best for me. That was like, I didn't want to be somebody with a giant presence on YouTube, because I see how those people get treated in the comments, and they have to be bulletproof. They have to be, because people are acting out their pain and confusion quite frequently by picking on people in comment sections, because it's called safe targeting. And that was something that I wanted to discuss. And I've just used a phrase that I have somebody who's listening who's like, hey, is this going to be about me? A little bit, and you're going to recognize where I'm changing things to try. And remember, we are each other's teachers. This is not about calling you out. It's about, while we were talking, I realized something that would be beneficial for others. Please forgive me for sharing it without any details that would ever identify you. Sometimes I have to do that because we're all trying to learn. This person had experienced betrayal within a relationship. They then went on to have a different relationship that was not in any way the same relationship, and it wasn't, I can't outline it too much, but this person did something that vaguely resembled the initial hurt. Now, the initial hurt, the problem was that the person would never admit that they'd done it. They were a form of narcissist. People can be narcissistic without being diagnosable narcissists. We can have moments of narcissism. We can tend towards narcissism within relationships, but be wonderful people outside of them. You can, it's not an all or nothing. Everything exists on the mild, moderate, and severe. And is that person mildly in personal relationships? They are quite narcissistic, but they are actually, men are taught in most societies that they are more important than women. This leads to them sometimes behaving as narcissists within relationships, because remember, people believe what they are taught. On some level, they have subconsciously absorbed the idea that a woman's world, a woman's response, I'm never trying to be gendered, you guys know that part, but we are programmed, we are societally encouraged to conform to these particular rigid structures. And in those rigid structures, some people find in the area of male and told you are more important than the people who are in the area of female, who are supposed to pop out babies. That's why they're there. They're just, most organized religions say that women were created to serve men. And it's like, well, that's really convenient in patriarchal societies. I don't suspect a sinister agenda there at all, but of course I do, because there is one. When we're trying to talk about generational curses, one of the things that in breaking cycles is we have to remember that this idea is reinforced over and over and over again. When I talk about a generational curse, people are over there, imagining witch doctors casting bones and goats, and nope. Generational curses are cast over and over and over again on every Sunday, Friday, every weekend, where religious leaders reinforce the idea that because somebody has a particular designation, they exist within a hierarchical form of, you are more important in the eyes of the divine, and that is simply not true. We are all equal. We are all equal, and you're right, your beliefs are right for you. And you can actually say, I can see the agenda behind telling men that, so that they felt like they had something to have power over, so that they didn't resent that this greater power structure then had power over them. That's why that happened. We have to give them something to kick, and it was women. And is that fair? No, it's rotten. It's horrible. It's the generational curse that we're trying to break as well. Now, I'm not some screaming feminist. Feminism is not about judging the choices of other women. It's making sure we have all the choices available to us. And that's what feminism is. But it's been corrupted as a power play instead of a play for equality and the right to choose. Maybe you want to be a traditional wife. That's right, fine if you're choosing it. Because some people are more maternal than others. So in this particular situation, sorry, I got a little off track there, because I'm a little nervous about talking about, I don't ever want somebody to feel hurt. This person was hurt by the betrayal of the person who would never admit accountability because they would not question their actions, because they were taught by a society that they were within their rights to behave in this manner, and that's what men do. And this woman was just out of her mind to be hurt by it, and he was still hurting her in different ways that I cannot go into. And in this relationship where this person did something that vaguely represented it, this other person had a disproportionate response, and all of the feelings that they never got to express to that person because that person didn't care, they then expressed towards this friendship, and it really endangered the friendship. And during our meeting, I said, well, you did something called safe targeting. You had some things that you needed to process. The situation resembled that which came before, which is a cycle repeating. And so you are allowing yourself to feel this anger, this betrayal at an enhanced and an overreactive level because you haven't healed from this one. And I think it made perfect sense to the person I was trying to help, but that's what everybody has to look for. That's how cycles work. Cycles work with the original offender and then the ways that we react to it that are disproportionate. And it really is about, as soon as you see it, you've broken a cycle, because then you have the power to, if you understand a behavior, you can counteract it. If you understand what something did to you, you can forgive it. The ways that we are breaking our cycles is to stop and say, how am I participating in my own pain? And in what way can I change my perspective to feel better about things? Because one of the stages that people get stuck in is understanding that, I will use myself as an example here. The things that my mother called me stupid constantly. One of her favorite things to say to me was, get out of my sight. I can't stand the sight of you. She did not have custody of me. She saw me fairly rarely, and this is how she spoke to me. And I was little. I was like 7 years old, 7, 8. She once beat me very badly for putting something on backwards. Like she had this weird reactionary thing. And did that do a lot of damage to me? Of course it did. Being told I was stupid constantly made me never believe in myself. I have overcome that, and again, really look at her situation as like, you must feel awful inside if that's the way you react to things. And I started to feel bad for her. And she doesn't have any impact on my life because she's somebody I can't have in my life any longer. But if you start changing your perspective, the elusive part of healing will be there. And the elusive part of healing for most people is the letting go of it. And we can't let go of something until we understand what it did. And then we understand how we are participating in the perpetuation of something. And until we understand that there's no judgment from anything involved in this. So don't judge yourself. Don't judge yourself. If you really want the key to being okay and breaking the cycles that will then, and does it have to do with karma? Yes, because karma is lessons. It is learning that lesson. You will have learned that lesson, and you will be free from the prison that the mind that you have has made of you, because our ego is a prison, and we have the key to that door. And a lot of times, in the case of, as I help people heal from codependency, I've had to accept that many people will not heal from it, because it is part of an emotional need that until we learn how to meet our own emotional needs, we look towards another person. And it's that simple. That I needed to not make any part of my journey about whether or not somebody else healed from it. I can give them the information, and then they must go on their way, and whether or not they heal from it, whether or not they embrace it. It does make me a little, like, Teflon coated in the work that I do now, but I needed to be. If I overinvested in somebody else's journey, I was going to be the one that was paying because I didn't really have control over it. And I want you to understand something about, well, why would I want to do all this work that sounds hard and taxing and draining and about examining myself and still liking myself? Because really, the whole, like, what have I done that I want to change about myself, is you have to let go of judgment. You have to be self-forgiving of, like, well, everything in my 20s where I didn't, did I like myself as a 20-year-old? No, my God, I was so angry, but I had a lot of really bad things happen to me. I haven't gone into them. It's ridiculous past a certain point. It really got piled on. And yet I know so many people who had it even worse. I know how lucky I was. Everything was survivable for me because I have the type of brain that loves to solve problems and acquire new information. And every piece of information that I get aids in my understanding of self and of others. And the reason that you want to break a cycle is that the idea that we come back until we learn those lessons is what karma is based in. And I need you to understand something. Time is not linear. If you die here and you are set to reincarnate, you might repeat your life, or you might go back to a different point in time in the 1500s. We don't know. The structure of time being everything is present at once. It's not a linear thing. It's a consciousness thing, is part of a belief as well. And that's not to threaten anybody. It's just, if you can't understand how that would be possible without it, changing timelines so much. It is possible because we have a central timeline in our lives that contains major events, relationships, degrees, purposes, accidents, all kinds of things that we get guided back to. But the vast majority of our choices are not fateful. They build towards what we do at those fateful moments. So a timeline only looks straight from one perspective. If you look at it, it actually has this weaving of different choices that lead people back to a central point. Overall changing of fate is not really possible, but you can change what you can do within a fateful moment. And then the fateful moment that has you confronting your next, usually ego issue in your spiritual journey, is brought to you in a different form. The easiest example of that is I've talked about how when I married my ex-husband, I had multiple people. I had a person, his name was Mario, which always cracks me up, Mario the shaman. I had a shaman tell me, hey, listen, you're a shaman and you need to leave your husband because you have work to do. You have healing work to do. And I said, I'm not going to leave my husband. His father had just died, and I kind of wanted to leave him because he was really not kind, but like I couldn't do that to him. I couldn't do that to him. He got worse around grief, and so a part of me really did want to get the heck away from him. But I just couldn't do that to him. I actually loved him very dearly. I just didn't romantically love him particularly because he's not a particularly romantic person. But I loved him for the security that he provided that I had never had before in my life. And I really would have done almost anything to help him. But I was eventually hurting myself so much by being with him that I had to leave. And he didn't care that he was causing damage to me because he was in all his own pain and he was blaming me for it because that's the nature of codependency. Um, Again, one of the things that we are looking for are the points where we had a fateful opportunity and we chose a different path. If at the age of 32, when somebody said that, I guess it was 30, maybe 35, I'm sorry, I got that number wrong there for a moment. If I had chosen to say, gosh, you're right, I have always been the person people bring their stuff to, and then I tell them something and they feel better and they feel like their problems were solved, and you're right, I'm probably a healer. If I had done that and said, I'm outie, like, everything might have turned out differently. Instead, the roads convened until I had to make that choice, and the path that opened up towards me was initially tarot reading, but then I understood by when I'm looking in cards, I can see somebody's past. I can see how much trauma that they're carrying. And I was able to see the ways to help them address it. I had my own healing to do first, and then, I help people heal their stuff so they can get their best outcomes going forward, so they can participate in their own journey, so that when their fateful crossroads comes their way, they choose the path of the one that's going to lead them higher and higher and higher and away from the struggles. Because that's the other part, is that you're not just doing it so you never come back, it's so that you can come back and have a life that contains more of the happiness and the joy and the etc., etc. And the world is always going to be a conflicted place because of the dark energy, the light energy, and the neutral energy. It all keeps things in balance. We've really swung towards the darkness, and the more that people do that is towards light, please remember the world is a kind and a good place too. Heal yourself and you will find yourself in that energy more and more frequently. There's a lot of wrong-headed stuff going on in this world. If we participate in the idea of being angry and being hateful, through the act of hating, we become that which we hate. It's, intolerant, angry, shaming, blaming, all of the things that it poisons your own soul. When they talk about hatred being like taking poison and waiting for the other person to die, it's really true. The only way to truly stop a cycle is to step outside of the reactionary energies of it and see the ways in which, when I use my client's example of the safe targeting, many of us are using safe targeting when it comes to an opposing side right now. Part of the reason that I'm able to feel this like on such a deep level is I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania for the first 15 years of my life. My father suddenly died, and I had to go to a very, very, very affluent area because my mother worked for an Ivy League university. And so culture shock doesn't even begin to describe it. But I know fully well that the people in northeastern Pennsylvania are good and kind, and I was on the receiving end of it on many, many levels. The people in the very affluent area, they were often kind, but they were far more guarded and like more about preserving their own things. There were some incredibly good people. There's no all-encompassing statement for people. People are who they are within circumstances, and it is easier to be kind sometimes when you have the empathy for other people's suffering that things like the poverty of northeastern Pennsylvania can bring. And I know that those people can have a good heart, but I know that we're taught things. We're taught things about who are suffering, who's really responsible for our suffering. And the reality is that what we've invested in is really the responsible for our suffering. We have made a world that is very acquisition based, and then greed has taken over. One of the easiest ways to start freeing yourself from a cycle, because I will give you the like, hey, that all sounds arduous, I don't want to do it. What can I do that will help break a cycle? Find what you don't need to buy in your life any longer, because that is the biggest thing that you can contribute to changing the trajectory of the cycle that we are in historically. Everything driving this machine is greed-based. Quit buying into it. Find the ways in which every time you go to buy something, ask yourself, do I want this to make myself feel better, or is it a true need? And if it doesn't fit a true need, then you stop and say, is there a different way I could feel better? Should I go and take a walk? Should I go and sit down and meditate? Should I put on some happy music? Should I maybe color, or any of the other things that don't involve participating in the capitalistic structure that is killing us all? Because it's killing the planet, killing us all. If you can find a way not to participate in that, you are participating in breaking a cycle. You are participating in making things better. You do not have to have hatred in your heart. You do not need to pick up a bayonet and run into battle. You need to step outside of the perpetuating cycle of greed and capitalism that is sustaining a world that is headed towards a cliff. And I am not an alarmist, and I am not blaming any of the people caught up in that. It's all about the power structures. But the way to stop it, if you really are like, everything else sounds pretty arduous, I have all my own crap and it's uncomfortable to be me, find what you do not need to buy, and you will be contributing to making things better. And then don't buy it. Don't buy it. Simplify your life as much as you can, and you will be participating in breaking a generational cycle, because generational cycles are not just in families. They are not just personal. They are not just about your personal relationships or your personal feelings. They are about in how power structures rise and then fall. That is a cycle that is repeated over and over again. And if you don't believe that we're in a cycle right now, please examine, do I believe that because it makes me feel safer? Because all of the evidence is there. Literally all of the evidence is there, is that we are in a cycle that we actually have power to break, but we have to make good choices around it. It's easier to make good choices when you've healed, so start with healing your stuff. And know that it's worth it. Even if it means sacrificing, I thought I wanted this, I thought I wanted that, I thought I wanted the other thing. I am happy, I am healthy, I am well. I have resolved every form of disorder that I had. that was a result of trauma, because I was willing to say, I'm going to figure out how to be happy with the Libby app where I borrow books from. And am I completely non-consumerism? No, I'm not. Sometimes I buy stuff that I like. I like skincare stuff so much. Is this important to how I approach self? You don't have to be perfect. That's the other thing, is perfectionism is an ego issue. It's also about fear of failure. It's also about not ever feeling like you're good enough, or you're comparing yourself to how everybody else is doing. Comparison is actually the thief of joy. You deserve to live joyfully, and this world deserves to have more chances to keep going forward and to heal, and to find the time where we are able to do that as a bigger group of saying, I choose what is best for me, but for everybody else as well. Tread lightly on the earth as well. The other thing that you can do is unplug your appliances when they are not in use, because they are a power drain. Don't give away any of your power. Don't give away any of your power, and try not to participate in the I buy stuff to make me feel better. I live in an area that is very, very materialistic. One of the places I have to go to on a fairly regular basis has me driving past a Bentley dealership. It's really materialistic. It has been one of the more challenging things to say, and it's not out of financial need, by the way. I guess I should cover that. A lot of the choices that I made, I could afford, because, in that divorce, like, a house was sold. I was, it's not ridiculous amounts of money or anything, but it's like, I have money enough to heal. Yay. Again, I'm a lucky girl. I'm a very lucky person. Find the ways that you feel lucky, by the way. When you're really down on yourself and feeling bad, find the ways in which you're lucky. And you can do it in any set of circumstances. The first time that I ever did it, and it was really like a lightning bolt to the head, was lying there in so much pain. I can't tell you how much it hurts to have your bones crushed. Oh, so much. I was in a lot of pain. And I am morphine intolerant, which is one of the biggest gifts that I have ever had, because it removed the idea that I would get addicted to that kind of painkiller. Barbiturates don't kill pain in the same way. And I used to have migraines, and for a while I have suffered from a tendency to mask emotional pain. And so barbiturates, I don't take them at all any longer, because it's like, nope, I have a tendency to abuse that substance for emotional numbness, so I won't do it. Willpower is one of the things that has helped me tremendously, but recognizing where it was stubbornness that was turning towards self-destruction was one of the harder things. Unplug your appliances, find what you don't need to buy. If you're not up to doing hey, listen, this world is terrifying me, so I'm not up to doing the deep dive on the how do I process my trauma, that is how you can participate in breaking a cycle. And that is one of the ways that you find how to embrace your inner rebel. Cycles have to do with conforming to an energy that has come before it. Find where you need to break from your conformity. And one of the things that was most freeing for me was, again, giving myself permission to really, really stay by myself a lot. And I have people who are like, for the people who have been my friends, it's not that I don't like you. I like you tremendously. I just get really tired. And I had some stuff that I had to do, and the work that I do is all about trying to, channel healing energy to other people. And because of the good part of how I grew up was that I spent a lot of time alone. And so I just thrive on it, and it's not personal. Does it make me a little avoidant on things? I don't know if that's still something I'm healing. I'm pretty healed. Maybe that will heal. But give yourself, but that was absolutely breaking from conformity, because literally every source will tell you isolation is bad for you, and it was great for me. And there may be something like that for you as well. So find your inner rebel. And the first thing to do is, if you just are like, some counts, by the way, in this weird all or nothing type of world, some counts. Do something to help. And the first thing that you can do to help is unplug appliances you aren't working with, because it increases your electric bill, and it increases a drain on power that then has to be produced, which is hard on the environment. When you're at the grocery store, look in your cart and find the one thing that it's like, that's not even good for me, because we're very sensitive to chemicals right now as well. And of course, the other thing is in disengaging and spending some time without any input, because it's great for your cognitive health. So disengaging from your phone, disengaging from your computers, disengaging from electronic devices that are stealing your focus and also stealing your power. Unplug yourself too. Okay, so that's how we start breaking cycles. I hope that this was helpful to you. I will see you guys again next month. If you need to find me, at therisingmoon.com, only way to book me. Tarot at the Rising Moon, where the video versions of this go up. And maybe someday I'll start putting up more tarot, but I do have a Patreon where I give people healing advice every week and every month. And then also here at Logical Magic, Examining Esoterica. And that, by the way, is the name of my Patreon, Logical Magic, Examining Esoterica. If you have any interest in joining me and in supporting the work that I do, that's the way to do it. You guys take care. Be well. I will see you next time.